Your first question is this. There seems to be an explosion in the number of people investing in HMOs. Will this cause an oversupply, and should I concentrate my efforts on individual buy-to-let properties instead? Now, just before you answer that, perhaps you'd be kind enough to explain to some of our viewers who might not know what an HMO is, what in fact it is.
It's a house of multiple occupation, and it is a regulated environment and a licensed environment insofar as, depending on the number of occupants and previously the size of the building, you would or wouldn't need a license in a given local authority area. So it's 5 occupants or more, composed of 3 individual families, I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, correct.
So technically then the difference between a house that's, say, got 3 apartments in it, this would be a number of bedrooms that are let to somebody and they're all sharing sort of communal areas like kitchen and bathrooms perhaps?
Yes, yes. Without going too much into detail, yes, as you defined it. As a landlord, you will let your property to a family or to an individual or a couple, or you will let it by the room.
Right. And our viewers identifying an explosion in the number of these things.
Correct.
What's the attraction for an owner then?
Okay, well, the attraction is cash flow. It's more rental income. Okay. And in the last, well, certainly in the last 3 years since George Osborne announced Section 24, which means that private landlords with properties in their own individual names are subject to a more rigorous tax regime now. Landlords are looking at avenues where they can raise more revenue from their individual properties, okay. And HMOs certainly fall into that category. Let's
just go back on that again. I do want to make sure everybody understands our terminology, which is easy for us but not quite so easy for them. So this Section 24, what's that all about? It's
a scheme, a tax scheme that's been brought in by the recent governments. It's now in place now. I think we're now into the 3rd year of a programme of it being phased in. But effectively, any UK business can offset their finance costs against their business income. However, with the Section 24, it means that you, as a private landlord, can no longer do that. I would strongly advise anyone wanting to understand about Section 24 and its impact on an individual landlord to speak to a professional tax advisor.
So in essence, you wouldn't be able to offset your mortgage interest costs, but you probably would be able to offset maintenance costs?
Yes, oh yes, absolutely. Like any other normal business, you can offset most of your costs. There is still, you are still able to offset some of your finance costs, but it is a much more stricter and less profitable now because of the impact of Section 24.
So coming to the essence of the question then, would you advise somebody starting out here to go for an HMO or to go on individual buy-to-let projects?
Well, that would depend on their experience. I certainly wouldn't advise anybody to do HMO properties or any of the variants on that, which we're hearing more and more about, without having had some good experience as an individual buy-to-let landlord. In terms of HMO properties, you can have what I would call a mini-mo, which is effectively a 3 or 4 bedroom house with maybe 3 or 4 individual tenants within it, all the way up to HMO properties with 40, 45 tenants within them. Some of these are above commercial buildings, but they are all HMOs which have been created to where each tenant has an individual room. That would be my stock answer on this would be, don't go into HMOs without experience.
Okay, cool. Anything to add?
I think typically HMOs used to provide investors with bigger yields, bigger returns. However, now HMO is, I mean, you have to cover, obviously it's regulation, legislation, getting licenses. Yes. You have to cover cleaning costs, gardening costs, council tax bills. You know, most of the HMOs come with bills included.
You've also got planning as well, planning laws. Planning. You've got Article 4 is something you have to take into account.
Parking issues, you know, so they definitely come with, so from my experience, whenever I've looked at yields for a client, a HMO actually doesn't actually always work out cost effective. No. Then you have to be experienced typically with lenders. So you have to have, you know, circa 3 buy-to-lets or a minimum of 3 years experience being a buy-to-let landlord of individual properties to get into HMO investment.
I would think the tenant churn is quite a lot higher too, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
and wear and
you
tear
need-
on the property.
Yeah.
So I think when you take into consideration all of those things and the tax laws changing, and it's not, I'm not saying it's definitely not the best route to go down, but I actually really agree with Richard. If you've got no experience, don't go there initially. But you know, there are some good returns to be
Yeah,
made on
absolutely,
the
there
right
are.
properties.
Yeah.
It can depend. The one other thing I would say is capital growth.
Yeah.
So if you've wrecked your property by, with all due respect, putting you know, individual doors on, you've done this, you've done that, to put it back into a habitable house to sell on the domestic market, which is probably the best market in terms of the most buyers, is expensive. So although you're getting the yield, you've got a balance between getting a better return on your money, once again, to getting capital growth.
I would add on the cost of equipping, on the cost of changing, the far more important cost to be borne in mind is conversion. What a lot of landlords are doing is taking a straightforward family house and then creating up to what is called sui generis level, which is 7 or more bedrooms, up to 6. Then fine, but more often to create those 5th or 6th bedrooms, people are going up into lofts and doing structural alterations within the loft area. You're not talking about £5,000 or £10,000 to replace some doors. In London and the southeast, and some of the, you know, you may be talking anywhere up to 250,000 to add that 5th and 6th bedroom.
It's not for the faint-hearted.
It's not, absolutely, John. It's not for the faint-hearted.
If you have any questions you'd like to send to the experts at Property Question Time, you can submit them via our website, on social media, or email us on info@propertytelevision.co.uk.